Autumn was wet and gray, as if nature itself knew in advance that everything would go to hell. At the city thermal power plant, where Stas worked as a signalman, the signal disappeared in the morning. First the mobile connection, then the walkie-talkie went off, and the siren of the old citizen turned on in the control room. The two technicians he was on duty with went to the substation and did not return. The station was humming violently, as if her lungs had broken, and the sound was rushing out in a rusty metallic wheeze. Smoke was billowing outside the windows, not white from the stoves but greasy, black, like from a tire fitting. Only it wasn't the rubber that was burning. In the morning, he heard ambulances rushing through the streets with muffled sirens. But by lunchtime, everything was quiet. The radio picked up only fragments of phrases. Enter the perimeter. Sweep. Point control. And all this sounded not like salvation, but like a sentence. The thermometer was +3, but Stas felt like he was freezing from the inside out, as if something heavy had already landed on his chest. Dimka's partner flew in through the south entrance, covered in blood, with a torn jacket and a face as pale as lime. He didn't scream, just shook his head like it was broken. His eyes were wild, his mouth was moving, but he couldn't hear the words. His left arm hung like a rag, with white bone fragments sticking out, and there was torn meat on his elbow, as if it had been chewed. Stas pulled the first aid kit out of the flap, but he already realized that there was no need to treat it with bandages. While he was pressing a dirty tourniquet to the wound, Dimka whispered, "The old grandmother bit. Not a human being." He began to convulse and rolled his eyes. There was already something wrong in them. Not human, as if something else was sitting in his skull. Stas did what he had to do. He took a shovel and hit the back of his head twice. No shouting, no panic. It just couldn't have been any other way. Dimka died a man, not what everyone else turned into. Stas stood over the body, breathing heavily, and felt his palms tremble, although there was silence in his chest. Not fear, not pity, but emptiness. He turned off the main switch, took out his jacket and headed to the basement under the thermal power plant. The old diesel warehouse, where the technician hid kerosene and rags, was a reliable shelter. He knew that an operation had begun in the city. Not a rescue operation, but a military one. Heavy boots were already marching through the streets, tanks were smoking outside, and there were bursts of gunfire. Shots were fired without warning, windows were blown off, and the 5-story building across the street was sliced off in a single salvo, right in the center, like a pie knife. Furniture fell out of the breach, someone fell along with the bricks, but the shots did not stop. It wasn't a panic, it was a sweep. There were 6 people in the basement. He knew right away that they hadn't been here for days. An old woman in a padded jacket, a teenager of about 15, a pregnant woman, a man with a beard and a homeless man blue from the cold, who had only rubber left from his shoes. Murom, that was the name of the one who was sitting at the entrance with the fittings, looked at Stas like an animal defending its lair. No one asked unnecessary questions. Everyone had already heard the explosions, seen the flashes through the grills, and knew that there was nothing left above. The woman, Katya, spoke softly, as if she was afraid to disturb something in the dark. "I'm waiting for my husband. He's in the Interior Ministry. He'll find us." Everyone was silent. Everyone understood that no one would come. The old man, his name was Viktor Ivanovich, was pouring water from a plastic canister over the lids. He was shaking and coughing, but he held on. He had army habits, apparently from the old ones, who had passed Chechnya. He was the first to ask where Stas came from and if he had any news. He answered bluntly, "There are infected people, the military is in the city, but there is nowhere to wait for rescue. The army is shooting at the living. Zombies are running around the basements." Victor nodded, not surprised. Apparently, he already knew. They had enough food for 2 days, a couple of canned goods, water, and a pack of cookies. Then the road. But where to? Where to go if the whole earth is under your boot? Stas turned on the old walkie-talkie on the table, tuned the wave. The signals went off. A female voice spoke with a radio hoarseness. "Sectors A3 and B5 are cleared. Phase 5, work out the cluster points." No rescuers, no evacuation. Just a sweep. Everything was working like clockwork, but the person here no longer mattered. A teenager was sitting in a corner and drawing something on the wall with a nail, a map, symbols, or just a doodle. He didn't speak. I just watched. There was something too adult in his gaze, as if he knew how it would end. There was another explosion from above. Dust fell from the ceiling. Someone screamed. Muram abruptly stood up and squeezed the rebar. The basement became stuffy. Stas wiped his forehead and suddenly realized that he couldn't hear himself breathing. Everything inside froze, as if before a storm. He didn't know if they would survive, but he knew for sure that there weren't people left up there. There are orders, an army, drones, and zombies left. And they all didn't care who you were, what you were wearing, whether you had a child or a mother. The wind was howling outside, or not the wind. The basement they were hiding in used to be a warehouse. Old tanks with diesel fuel, boxes with insulators, a rusted ladder leading to a ventilation shaft. The air there was heavy, humid, with a taste of mold and something chemical, as if the smell of all the spills in 40 years had been absorbed. The light was provided by a single battery-powered flashlight attached to a ceiling pipe with electrical tape. No one was talking out loud. Everyone was doing something to avoid thinking. Katya was writing something in a notebook. An old man was cleaning a knife. A teenager was picking at a brick wall and putting crumbs in his pocket. Murom, the bearded man with the armature, sat at the exit and smoked an unfiltered cigarette, waiting. Stas stayed apart, closer to the generator. He did not know these people, but he understood that there were no strangers left among them. Viktor Ivanovich spoke first. He went up to Stas, leaned on one knee and asked quietly, "Is the army really in the city?" "I saw it myself. Trucks with thermal imagers, Tigers, a couple of drones. They're shooting at the windows, without warning." "Are they doing a sweep?" "For the living. Everyone. The living, the dead. There is no difference." The old man just exhaled and walked back, as if he had heard what he expected. He held himself calmly, but his eyes were like those of a man who had nothing left to lose. Stas had seen them with a colleague in Dagestan when he found the body bag after the assault. Katya raised her head, looked around at everyone. "We need to get out. They'll burn everything. The city is like a trap." "Where do you want to go?" Muram muttered. "There's only iron and ashes up there," she whispered. "I'm not going to let a child die in a hole." "It's like someone's giving you a choice," he replied. "If you want, go. Just don't come back." The conversation died down. It was the right question, but everyone already knew the answer. There was a war going on outside, but there were no sides, neither their own nor others. Everything that moved became a target. Zombie, people. There is no difference left. The teenager was sitting in the corner. His name was Ilya, about 15 years old, thin, wearing a black jacket with a hole in the elbow. He didn't speak. I just watched. Sometimes he painted something on the wall with a nail. Diagrams, maps, faces, maybe just out of boredom. When Katya tried to approach him, he pulled away. He only looked at Stas without fear. Then suddenly he whispered, "They're coming from below. Through channels. I hear." No one understood who he was talking about. But there was something really scratching under the floor at night. Rust, knocking, splashing. It's like rats are just too heavy to be rats. The ventilation began to howl. This meant one thing. Gas was bursting out. The cultivation of the territory may have begun. Yesterday, there were signals on the radio about the A3 sector, which was treated with phosphorus munitions. If they stay here, they'll just be smoked out of the air. Muram suggested a way. "I know the tunnel. It's old, from the 80s. Fuel oil was transported through it to the tanks. Then they closed it. But the passage remained. It goes out into the old mines. From there you can go to the station. Maybe we can bypass the army blocks." "Do you know for sure?" Stas asked. "I hid there in the 90s. From people. Now it's from zombies. The essence is the same." Another explosion. This time somewhere very close. The floor shook, someone screamed, and dust fell from the ceiling. Stas knew he couldn't wait any longer. The smell of fumes appeared in the air, not like from a bonfire, but like from asphalt soaked with napalm. He nodded silently. The group began to pack their things. Katya has only one backpack left. The old man has an army flask and a knife. The teenager has scissors and a flashlight on an elastic band. Stas took a monkey wrench. They decided to throw the generator. The noise attracted attention. They went into the tunnel quietly, as if they knew there would be no turning back. The trapdoor in the floor opened tightly, with such a creak that even the dead would have turned around. Muram pulled it out with a tire iron, flipped the lid aside, and a stench exhaled from the ground. Rotten moisture, metal, and rotting rubber. Ilya got in first. The guy moved confidently, without words, as if he had been ready for this for a long time. Victor followed him, then Katya, Muram, and finally Stas. They didn't close the lid behind them. There was no point. If someone follows them, they will find a way anyway. The main thing is to get further away before the rumble on the surface drowns out their footsteps. The tunnel went deeper, and the further it got, the darker it got. The lamps along the walls, old, dusty, and rusty, had not worked for a long time. The water was ankle deep, and in places higher, cold, smelly shit was getting into the boots. The walls were covered with fungus, wires were sticking out of the cracks, and in some places there were dilapidated floors and rotten beams. Stas went last, making sure that no one was left behind. The sound of footsteps was muffled by moisture, but it still felt like someone else was following, on the water. He turned around, shone his flashlight, and it was empty. Only pipes, cobwebs, dampness, and gray haze. Ilya stopped at a dead end. On the left is a metal door, rusty, with a lock that has long rotted away. Muram kicked it with a swing, and it cracked open. Behind it is an old branch of the tunnel, along which once there were carts with fuel. The rails were rusted, but the track was there. It was dark and quiet inside, but the air was heavier, as if trapped by decades of fear. Katya coughed. Stas handed her the bottle. "Is there a branch line to the subway?" "Yes," Muram nodded. "If we go to the end, there's an exit for ventilation. There you can get out on a piece of metal." "Are you sure?" "No, but we don't have any options." We walked about 100 meters when the tunnel rang with a scream. Victor was walking ahead, suddenly stopped abruptly and raised his hand. Everyone froze. The rustle was sharp and ragged, as if someone was scratching concrete with their fingernails. Stas pressed down on the flashlight. A weak beam tore out a silhouette from the darkness. Tall, uneven, and lopsided. Suddenly he lunged forward, growling. The sound was not human. It was a hollow, throaty squeal, like that of a dog whose throat is being broken. Muram stepped forward and hit the rebar. It's too late. The figure knocked Victor down, knocked him down, and the teeth sank into his shoulder. Blood gushed onto the concrete. Stas jumped, hit the monkey wrench in the head, once, twice, 3 times. The skull cracked, the figure sagged. Victor was no longer moving. Katya stood in a stupor. Ilya watched in silence. Only Muram gasped, looking at the corpse. There was one, but if there is one here, there will be more. Was he breathing? No, he waited. They don't wander. They're sitting. Stas took a flashlight and illuminated the tunnel. In the dark, there are scratches on the walls, shreds of clothing, broken teeth. Obviously something has already happened here. But no one knew when or how many more were left. I had to leave the body. There's nowhere to bury it, and you can't drag it. Katya was crying silently, into her fist. Ilya turned away. Stas felt bad, but he knew that time was too expensive here. They moved on. Muram went first. He knew the way, but he was no longer what he had been an hour ago. The eyes became angrier. He pulled an army knife from behind his back and did not let it out of his hands. Stas felt that Muram was dangerous now. He wasn't afraid of death. He started looking for her. The exit turned out to be where Moore had promised. An old ventilation shaft, half buried, with metal brackets leading upward. He climbed in first, swearing, with a flashlight in his mouth. Behind him are Ilya, Katya, and Stas. When Muram moved the heavy grate, light hit his face, not sunlight, but gray-yellow, like from searchlights. It was morning, or something like it. The sky hung low, as if pressing everything into the ground. Engines hummed over the horizon, and black columns of smoke crept over the trees. It smelled of burning and burnt cloth. They got out of the ground, but not to freedom. In front of them stretched a field, scorched, with sparse stumps and black earth, as if a fiery wave had passed through it. To the left, the remains of the village could be seen. Brick boxes, roofs without tiles, skewed pillars. There were armored vehicles with their lights out along the road going deep. No people, no zombies, just the wind and the roar. "Where are we?" Katya whispered. "This is the Sosnovka area," Murom replied. "It's about 6 kilometers from here to the station." "It's kind of empty," Stas said. "They've already passed through here," muttered Murom. "Or they're about to come back." They moved along the tree line, trying to stay out of line of sight. They walked in silence, quickly, each with their own thoughts. 40 minutes later, we reached a concrete pumping booth. It seemed to be empty, but there were tracks outside. There are fresh scratches on the door, like from a knife. Inside there is an idling generator and a walkie-talkie. Stas checked the frequency. Voice. Area 20, 4 cleared. Sector F7. Assessment completed. Transition to Area 25 activated. Katya's stomach is clenched, and her eyes are wide. "What does zone mean?" "That's us, our neighborhood, our city," said Murom. "They work by numbers, according to the scheme." At that moment, the sky flashed as a container was dropped into the field from the south. It's made of steel, long, and looks like a tank. A second later, there was an explosion. A dull orange flash, and a wave of heat ran across the ground. Everything settled into black smoke. Katya was thrown. She hit the wall and fell. Ilya screamed for the first time in all this time. Stas rushed to her. The skin on his cheek began to bubble like a burn. Katya was twitching, but she wasn't talking anymore. Stas realized that he was not a tenant. He wanted to tell her something, but he didn't know what. I just held her hand while she subsided. Murom retreated to a corner and howled. He punched the wall, leaving bloodstains. "They knew we were here. They knew." "Yes," Stas said. "It's not an accident." "It's not an epidemic," Ilya whispered. "That's the plan. We are part of their calculation." The booth was humming from the engine. The air crackled again outside the walls, another reset. "It's far away, but it's already clear. The zone is expanding. Their sector is passed. The next one is where they're going. We're not escaping. We're the targets," Stas said. He turned off the radio. "The signals have become useless. No survivors were expected. Only the dead were confirmed." They buried Katya under the boards, without words, just covered the body with old boxes and left. Ilya was silent. Murom became angry again, dry, as if everything human had flowed out of him. We walked through a scorched field, between burnt trees. A drone was circling in the sky. The machine guns on him were no longer empty. Stas knew that if he visited, they would be finished. He didn't look away. Let them watch. Let them see who they're killing. After 2 hours of walking, they came to a concrete fence, 3 meters high, with spikes at the top and traces of shelling. Beyond it, the forest was thinned and charred, and there was a strange silence in which not even the crows sang. A canal filled with black water stretched to the left. The water didn't move, as if it had died. To the right is a clearing leading to a sagging white brick building. It looked abandoned, but there was an antenna sticking out of the roof. Plastic, new, with warning lights. Murom sat down and looked around. "This is not a forester's hut. There used to be a base here. According to rumors, some kind of research institute was working on waterproofing, and then they closed it." "She's alive," Stas said. "Weak, but it works." The interior was unexpectedly clean. It's not perfect. Dust, peeling tiles, old shields, but without traces of combat, without debris, without devastation. There are yellow markings on the walls, arrows, numbers, letters. The technical corridor went deeper, and with every step it seemed that the air was getting drier. It smelled of alcohol and old plastic. In the first room there are laboratory tables, shelves with papers, jars with solutions, refrigerators. Everything seemed to have stopped a second ago. There was a folder on the table. Stas opened it. Protocol 13, Behavioral stimulation. Stage 3. The reaction is stable, aggression is controlled, and tissue breakdown is slowed down. What does that mean? Ilya asked. So, someone made them. Step by step. Not a disease. The construct. Murom opened the second compartment. Behind the glass partition is a metal armchair with arm and neck fasteners. There are stains on the floor. Not blood. Something gray like mud, but with a sheen. The wall is cracked, as if someone was trying to break through the concrete. There were blank screens on the monitors, but one was blinking. Stas turned it on. A face appeared. Semi-alive, with a network of capillaries under the skin. Next to it are the parameters: blood pressure, pulse, cortisol level, behavioral chart. They were testing people. They planted it. They injected something. Was this before the outbreak? I don't know. Maybe there is no flash. Maybe this is the outbreak, as part of the plan. There was a corpse on the floor in the server room, in a bathrobe, with a tablet, clutching an ampule with his hand. There's a carbine nearby. Judging by the position of the body, he shot himself. There is a private message on the tablet screen. The protocol has been activated without permission. We can't stop the process. Interception is impossible. There will be no evacuation. We were written off. Ilya was reading aloud. Then he lowered his eyes. He was no longer a teenager. There was no childhood left on his face, only understanding. He whispered, "We are not the first. We are a repeat, the field, on large numbers." Murom spat at the wall and clenched his fists. "We're just being used, like cattle, below zero." Then the residential area began. Staff rooms, beds, wash basins, cupboards. Everything is abandoned. In one room there is a child's drawing glued to the closet. On it, a figure, all in black, and people surrounded by fire. The inscription in a child's hand, "Uncle with an eye." Ilya looked at it for a long time. Have they even tried it on children? Apparently, yes. Stas breathed out. In the kitchen, there's a pot of dried pasta and a note. If you're reading this, run. The smell of rot is back. And Stas realized that they were not alone here. Outside, the air hummed again. Through the window it was visible. A helicopter hovered over the horizon. Not an army one. Black, with flat panels instead of sides. Drone. A slight noise, and an impulse passed through the field where they had come in the morning. The ground vibrated, the stones shook. "They're cleaning up the tracks," said Murom. "There will be nothing left of the laboratory. We're at zero." "We have to leave," Stas added. "Where to?" "To the east, to the platform. There's a branch there. Maybe they haven't reached it yet." No one answered. There were no more solutions. Only the path. Just go ahead. They left the complex and moved through the landing, between the rotten trunks. In the west, the sky turned scarlet, as if in a fire. Behind them, there was no longer a home. There was no point. Just glass, blood, and numbers. There are abandoned rails ahead. And behind them, the unknown. And maybe the last attempt to get out. Stas looked back at the building, which was hidden by the trees. The cameras recorded everything, but there's no one else to watch. "Maybe that's not the point," Ilya replied. "Maybe someone's watching. It's just... they're wondering how we're going to die." They were walking along an embankment along an old railway line overgrown with bushes and debris. The platform that Stas named turned out to be real, with a canopy, a rotten bench, and a stand where only a rusty grate remained of the schedule. There were no drones, the equipment was gone, or switched to other sectors. A biting wind was blowing, and there was a smell of ash and something sour, like from oxygen tanks. Murom walked ahead, as if he wanted to finish this journey faster. Ilya stayed close to Stas. His face turned gray. There was no light in his eyes anymore. They didn't talk. The words made no sense. Bodies were found on the platform. 5 of them. They looked like people who had fled, perhaps from the other side of the city. All of them have been shot through the head, smoothly, neatly, almost professionally. There are white armbands with the number 25 on the sleeves. Stas froze. This is a new zone. We didn't break out. We just changed the number. Murom was silent for a long time. Then he sat down next to one of the dead and said, looking somewhere into the gray sky, "I'm not running anymore. Tired. Another couple of kilometers. There will be a node," said Stas. "You go ahead. And I'm here. The road ahead is not for everyone." He stayed, without a scene, without saying goodbye. He just stayed among the dead, whom he no longer considered strangers. Stas and Ilya reached the railway junction in the evening. Everything was dead there. Rails, embankments, an old switchman's booth, inside of which there were only empty boxes and a burnt map. Someone wrote in charcoal on the wall, "The one who hears is also part of the scheme." Stas sat down on a bench, took off his shoe. His foot was swollen with an abscess. He knew he couldn't live with it. Ilya sat next to me and was silent. A train could be heard in the distance, a rarity, but it was there. A dull rumble, like an echo of a former civilization. Just not for them. Not this time. It started raining at night, cold, nasty, prickly, like everything this autumn. Stas sat wrapped in his jacket until he felt that he could no longer raise his hand. Everything that could be done is done. He pulled Katya's notebook out of his backpack. I flipped through it, and it was almost empty, except for one sheet. There was a childish inscription. "If someone survived, tell them that we were there." He closed the notebook and put it aside. Ilya was no longer breathing next to him. Calmly, without pain. He just left in his sleep, alone, among the ashes. At dawn, Stas went out to the tracks, lay down on the sleepers, looking up, where the sky became a little lighter. He didn't beg, he didn't scream, he didn't call for help. He just lay there. There was already noise behind the trees, machinery, tank engines, a new phase, a new line of fire. He closed his eyes. The last sound he heard was a thud, like a boot on asphalt. Then there was nothing, and no one left Zone 24.